Okay, today we're going to continue in that practical application. You've already answered the call to serve on the mission field. You've already prayed about how you want to go with what organization, and you've made the move to the mission field. You're dealing with culture shock. You're trying to get your life squared away. You're trying to get the wife and the children settled into a new environment, which is strange and hard on all of you. So now we're going to talk about some more practical things that you definitely need to be aware of. Now, first of all, let's talk about learning the language. The fact that you're on a foreign mission field, even in a country that may have English as an educated language. For example, in Uganda. In Uganda, English is the educated language. It's the language that they use in most schools. And there's a difference. If you want the language of the people, if you want to learn the heart language on the field, and we're going to talk about those, and this will also be on your test. 4 advantages. Number 1, it promotes a rapport with the people. To learn their when you're learning from the people who are on the field, it also allows you personal rapport. You can ask things about their culture while you're learning the language. For if you ask them, what does it mean when you say the word? Describe me the image that is in your mind. So you're not only learning the word for God, but you're also learning how they process the word God and their understanding of it. There was a phrase that I wanted to communicate to my father taught me. And my father said, if it is to be, it is up to me, which means if I'm going to learn something, then I'm the only one who can learn it. No one can learn it for me. I have to do the work. I have to appropriate that truth into myself. If it is to be, it is up to me. Nobody else can do my homework. No one else can get the understanding for me. I have to get it for myself. So I began to ask, how do you translate this? How do you translate this phrase? If it is to be, it is up to me. Now, in English, all of those words in that sentence only have 2 letters. And that's kind of an interesting thing. I sometimes talk about that. But in Māori, it doesn't have that. In Māori, it is Jokare Dewa Konganidri. Jokare Dewa Konganidri. When I began to learn the language over there, and I began to teach in the Bible Institute that we started, or in churches, I would speak this phrase, Jokare Dewa Konganidri. And that immediately let them know that I was learning the language there, that I was pronouncing it the way they pronounced it. I was trying to identify with them. You go to a country like Uganda where they speak multiple. It depends on the tribe. The official language, educated language, is English. The military language is Swahili. And then every tribe has their own local languages. For example, in Bugandan or Lugandan, if you want to say praise the Lord, it is pronounced differently than it is in Basoga, for example. Those two tribes live side by side of each other, the Bugandan and the Basoga. And it is Makamasimwe in one language, but it's Makamayebaziwe in another. Makamasimwe, Makamayebaziwe. In Madi, it's entirely different. In Madi, it is Achua Apini. So, to learn the language on the field, it helps you build those relationships with people on the field. It also affords you insight into the culture. How do they say good morning, hello, how are you? And what are the different responses? So you can't get that out of a textbook. You can't get the feel of the word. For example, one of the most used greetings all over Uganda is the word jumbo. Jumbo bwana hamadagani. Well, that's a Swahili phrase. Now, most everybody knows jumbo, and they use jumbo bwana. Okay? But if you're going to reach the Madis, for example, and you want to know that you're just not learning some language in some book someplace, the best greeting is Owira, which is the Madi form of saying good morning. Owira. So it lets you into the inside of the culture. Do they understand the other words? They do, but this is what is most meaningful to them. Number 3, it makes it possible for an effective communication of the gospel. When you begin to talk about theological terms, it's not just the word, but you want to make sure that you choose the word that carries with it the meaning that you want it to have, the theological accuracy. For example, there may be several different words for sin. There may be the word for the accidental sin. There may be a word for an evil, manipulative kind of sin. And there may be a word for sin of, I tried to do good, but bad happened. Well, if you're going to share the gospel, you need to understand the different words that they use for sin and how they're used. So it makes it more effective in communicating the gospel. And number 4, it gives the missionary a sense of urgency and confidence. Why urgency? Well, as you begin to learn the language and you begin to understand how they use these terms in their worldview, it gives you an urgency to get out there and start sharing the gospel, but it also gives you a confidence early on that you can do it. I can speak those words that will draw a person and pique a person's interest, that I can share the gospel with them. And that's a wonderful thing. So those 4 advantages to learning the language on the field, to that alone, it makes it more desirable to learn the language once I get to the field. It is also, to be quite honest with you, in one sense easier because it's sink or swim. When you are surrounded by the language all the time, when you are totally immersed in the language, you have no choice but to learn. I remember one time in the military that I was activated. I was sent to Central America, and I had only had 2 years of Spanish in school, in high school. So I found myself asking this question a lot. ¿Cómo se dice en español? And I would point. How do you say this in Spanish? What is this in Spanish? What is this in Spanish? What is this in Spanish? Okay? And understanding that helped bridge the gap between where I was, and language-wise, and where I needed to be. So I am a big proponent of trying to learn the language on the mission field, especially as a family, because you can go home and practice with each other, share insights. Children have a tendency to pick things up faster than adults do, and you can really help each other learn on the mission field. Each one of you are bringing back to the table every night and say, okay, what did y'all learn today? What new words did y'all learn? Okay, and then you can share with each other. And it makes it more of a unifying factor, something that the whole family is going through together. Speaking of family, how are you going to educate your kids on the mission field? And that's a big issue for a lot of people, and that's one of the things that they need to solve first. Well, there are basically 5 normal options to educate children on the mission field. Number 1 is homeschool, and you have to plan that in part of your family routine. Part of your family life is going to be homeschooling the children. Now, this doesn't always have to be done by just one parent. You can both do it. You can take turns. You can find homeschooling materials. You can take them with you. Now you can do classes online. You have the internet. So there's a plethora of tools out there that will allow you to educate your kids at doing homeschooling. Another option is you can allow them to stay behind in America and go to school. If you go to the Southern Baptist Convention, the International Mission Board, they look at the age of your children and what grades they're going to go through if you're spending 4 years on the mission field. For example, if you're a first-time appointee and you have a son who is going to go into the 11th grade, that means he's going to go on the mission field with you for 1 year, and then he's going to graduate. Is he going to go to university in that foreign country, or is he going to come back home and go to university? Who is going to pay for his travel? All those type things. So they're going to ask you those questions. Are you going to leave him behind and let him finish out his last year in high school living with his grandparents or his aunt and uncle? Or what are you going to do? So that's an option. You either homeschool, you can allow them to stay behind in the United States and go to school. You can find a mission school. Is there a mission school? Maybe you're going to go into an area, for example, like Kampala, Uganda, where there are multiple missionary families there, okay, and there may be a mission school there, okay, just among your children, the children of the people in your mission, which is really kind of a graduated homeschool. It's everybody doing homeschool, but they do it together and they share the workload. Fourth option is there a school on the field? In Uganda, in a place called Jinji, Uganda, they had a Riverside Academy. And the Riverside Academy it was a private school, but it had very high marks. A lot of missionaries sent their children there. A lot of the more affluent Ugandans sent their children there. There is a bus route that ran, and like I said, it was a private school, but it was a school right there in Jinja, and a lot of people used it. And there's a fifth option, and that's an American boarding school overseas or an international boarding school overseas. For example, there's a high school that's located in Kenya called the Rift Valley Academy. And the Great Rift Valley that runs from Middle East all the way through Central Africa comes down into Uganda and Kenya. And there's a very good school there at Rift Valley Academy. And a lot of people send their students, their children there to a boarding school. That's kind of foreign to us here in America, but it's been used in Europe for centuries. And it's a boarding school. You pack them up, at the end of August. You send them to school. They live there. They come home on holidays. You go up and visit on parent days, and that's the way it goes. They have summer at home with you. So that is an option. So your children are going to get a good education, and basically there's one of 5 normal options, and there's some new ones that are out there. 8 areas that might cause difficulty in relationships among missionaries. Now, this is where I'm going to spend the majority of today's time, because like it or not, these are the things that end missionary careers faster than anything else I know of. It's not hardship. It's not culture shock. It is not the distance that you are away from home, but it is usually a combination of some of these 8 issues. First of all, let me say, we're all human. Nobody's perfect. Okay? There are going to be people who are around you who make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. The question is, how forgiving can you be? How Christ-like in a given situation can you be? Nobody's perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. How are you going to live in that community? When I mean community, I mean those other missionaries. For example, you go to a restaurant that is frequented by missionaries. And there at the table, you see a couple that you have come to know, that y'all are really good friends. They've really been a help to you in the ministry. And you see them order 3 bottles of wine for dinner. And you don't drink. How are you going to deal with that? How does that play in your relationship? Are you going to ostracize them? Are you going to talk to them about it? Are you going to do a Bible study? Or are you going to sit, We're all human. So you have to deal with that. Secondly, they're strong personalities. Let's face it. If you're not a self-starter, if you don't have that strong personality, you're probably not going to be on the mission field anyway. But having that strong personality also makes it more prone to clash with someone else who has a strong personality. Okay, you have two alphas in the room. Who's the most alpha? So there are those things which leads us to personality clashes. There are just some people who, for whatever reason, feel rubbed wrong by a certain type of personality. Maybe they're too loud, they're too pushy, they're too boisterous, they're too larger than life, they're always on, and maybe your personality clashes with that. Maybe they're more emotional and they make decisions based on how they feel rather than looking at the bigger picture. Perhaps you're working together in the same mission and you're looking at the practical side of something and they're looking only at the emotional side of something. And it seems like every time you do it, there's going to be an argument and there's going to be a personality clash. How are you going to resolve that on the mission field? I was in a church as pastor, and I had a person on the finance committee who really didn't understand how finances work. And I told this person, I said, well, we have what is called a sweep account. And he said, what does that mean? And I said, well, we have our funds broken up into designated, and budget. But the bank doesn't care. The bank gives us interest on all of our money. When a check presents itself, the bank sweeps from that account that is always bearing interest, sweeps the money over to a checking account, and pays the check. So that we're always getting interest on all of our money. He did not grasp that concept. He said we ought to have a savings account and a checking account. And I explained, yes, but that would mean that we only draw interest on the savings account and not on the checking account. But if we have a sweep account, we draw interest on everything. Our records still indicate whether it was from savings or designated account or whether it was from a budget account. He was on that committee for 3 years. Every month for 3 years, we had the exact same conversation. That kind of grates on your nerves sometimes. Those personality clashes. There may be a behavioral trait that just gets on your nerves. I had a man in my church one time. I don't know why he did this, okay? But it seemed like the time that he cut his fingernails was always on a Sunday night service. And he would cut them and let them indiscriminately fly all over the sanctuary. And it's kind of hard to preach sometimes when you see people reacting at this thing that's hitting them from the air. And then they turn around and find out it's him clipping his fingernails. And I spoke to him several times. He goes, you know what? I don't even think a thing about it. And I said, could you refrain from doing it in the worship service? Can you cut them before or after? He goes, well, I'm just sitting there. And I look at him and I just reach in my pocket and pull out my fingernail clippers and just clip them. It's while it's on my mind. Never got him to change. I was at that church 15 years. Never got him to change. There's another problem. Okay, close quarters. When you are working so closely with people, You may be living in the same compound, the same apartment building, next door to each other, and you work together, you go home, you live beside each other, you do activities together, you're always together, and it's too close for comfort. That gets to be a problem. You've got to figure out some way to deal with that close quarters. Okay? A lot of people have the problem of the inability to choose your fellow workers. If you're on the mission field and you're serving a group of people, you've been there 2 or 3 years, and suddenly there's a new couple who feel called to work with that same group of people. They come from the same sending organization as you do. And they get there on the field, and their idea or their vision for ministry is so totally opposite from your vision that it becomes a point of contention. You've got to figure out a way to work that out, to let them be them and you be you, to give them the freedom to do what God has called them to do, as you have the freedom to do what God has called you to do. So, another one is lack of diversions. Now, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this that are important. Beloved, it's important in whatever ministry you're in that you make sure that you invest in those personal relationships, husband and wife, parents and children, that you figure out a way to have, and I call them diversions. Okay? If you're in Africa, take them on a safari. Take them to the local country club and let them go swimming. Plan a special picnic. Take them around to see the sights. Don't be so consumed by the work that you forget to foster that most important relationship with your family. Your family is the first ministry God called you to. You have to be that husband. You've got to be that wife. You've got to be that father. You've got to be that mother that those children deserve. Planning diversions. They don't have to be extraordinary. They don't have to be great. But they do have to be meaningful. For example, on the mission field, you may be in a country who has no idea what baseball is. So your son's not going to be involved in Little League or Babe Ruth or high school baseball. You may be in a country that doesn't know what basketball is or American football. So there aren't those games to rally around. There's not those things. Maybe it's all soccer. Or maybe it's cricket. Maybe it's something else that they do there. But your family needs that diversion time, that time away from the work that says we are still a family and we're on our own little diversion. It's not everybody in the mission, it's just us. We're going fishing today, or we're going hiking, or we're going to do this. You've got to make those times. Even if you're not on the mission field, if you're on the church field here in America, you still need to make time with your family for these little diversions. If you don't, it's going to hurt your family. I was talking to a pastor's child one time, a PK, and he had gone through a rebellious stage, and I asked him about that. And he said, and here's what he said, and I quote, he said, "I never thought I was good enough for my dad's time." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, if I was playing a baseball game, Dad would make 2 visits on his way to the game, watch the game, and make 2 visits on his way home. I never thought that I was good enough that Dad would just come to watch me play. Dad was always on his way to do something else, and had to do something else after his game. Let me emphasize that to you. A lack of diversions. Don't do that. Take those times away. Look at Jesus. Jesus often, in his ministry of 3.5 years, pulled away to a secluded place. And then the last thing, the presence of children. Since you're in a foreign field, since you don't have the support system of grandparents or aunts or uncles, and all you have each other, the children are always present. Sometimes that can grate on you. There are times that husband and wife need to get away without the children, just for a night, just for a weekend. Not that you want to shove your children to the side. I'm not saying that at all. But you've got to make that quality time together. Even on the field here in America, you still got to have date night. You still have to step away and build and encourage and nurture that marriage. It's good for the work on the field. It's good for the work among the family, and it's good for each other. These are some practical things that are important as you live life on the mission field or even on the church field. Let me encourage you to pray about these and think about these much. I'm trying to be as practical as I can so you can be prepared as you can when God speaks to your heart.